Welcome to the podcast on Stakeholder Management. I'm Danielle Goodrick, Knowledge Product Manager for CIPS, and joining me today I have Eirini Etimou. Hi Eirini.
Hi Danielle. Very
Nice.
good to be here.
Thank you, so nice to have you today. Eirini's joining us and she's a senior procurement professional and leader, having served a variety of industries and managed budgets exceeding a 2 billion global spend. She's got a track record of delivering clear business benefits, profitability, and overall value, and has sustainability always in mind. From her current procurement role within Odeon Cinemas Group, she's responsible for the development and real estate, FM and utilities across Europe, spanning 13 countries. And she's also a committee member of the CIPS Manchester branch. So again, Eirini, thank you so much for joining us today. This is the second podcast we're doing in the series. We did one on negotiation as well. So today's podcast will focus on the importance of soft skills. And in particular, we're going to focus on stakeholder management, which is identified as a key skill for professionals in 2020. Negotiating and influencing with suppliers has often been seen as the easier part of the process. So today's podcast will aim to give you tips on how you can increase influence internally, communicate better to stakeholders, win hearts and change mindsets. We'll also cover how professionals may need to adapt their skills to lead their organisations as we enter the new norm following the pandemic. With more remote teams, virtual meetings and less face-to-face contact, how's this going to work, and how can procurement capitalise on the opportunity and the spotlight that's been on the profession to date? So it's great to be able to get your perspective today, Eirini. You've got a wide range of experience dealing with various stakeholders on all levels across various organisations, I'm sure throughout your career, and have overcome many challenges in difficult stakeholder groups and individuals. So to kick off this podcast today, what would you say are the core stakeholder management skills, Eirini?
Thank you very much for the invitation again, and I really hope, first of all, that this will be interesting for the audience and not only CIPS members. We hope that we can give them some useful tips. So first of all, we need to understand what stakeholder management relates to. It has to do with how we can understand in the best way possible the people internally and externally that are dealing with and are affecting our work. They may affect us directly or indirectly, as they may have teams behind them or senior management that we will never meet with, but they still influence them. Therefore, we're talking about predominantly interpersonal skills. Here, active listening, effective communication, and reading the people and the situations are very important elements to achieve the desired outcome. Additionally, we need to have a positive attitude and the persistence to gain the knowledge, and the knowledge about our stakeholders, knowledge about the situation, but above all, about ourselves. If we think about it, we can only control ourselves. So it is important to develop such skills that can adjust and adapt different methodology to handle different types of stakeholders and situations without missing, of course, our personal and professional principles.
Great, thank you. And planning's key to this process, isn't it, Eirini, in terms of identifying who are your key and connected internally and externally stakeholders, and then using tools to plan this process. So what tools and processes do you use when planning your stakeholder management strategies?
For me, the fundamental is to know my stakeholders, to understand the situation and to properly communicate, to identify any initial blockers that I would need to consider. Depending on the case, as additional tools, I'm using the power influence versus interest grid when I need to understand the stakeholders' interest and power that must be considered, collisions, negotiation approach. The other tool that I find it useful is the relationship influence and field map. It is a tool that predominantly reflects the strength of the relationship that has been built, as well as stakeholders' position on this situation. There are also other tools like the power legitimacy versus urgency model and the problem frame stakeholder map. But to be honest, I find it much more practical and effective to follow the communication route, do my homework, and read the situation properly.
And adapt to your approach, I guess, as well to the people that you're dealing with.
Yes.
You've probably come across lots of different stakeholder groups where you've obviously needed to adapt. So what advice would you give someone who's trying to influence a difficult stakeholder group?
Just to clarify, since we're talking about interpersonal relationships, we will definitely need to adapt our strategy. Every time there will be a new situation that will require adjustment of the practice we will use to approach it. Now, in regard to how to deal with a difficult stakeholder or a difficult stakeholder group, I would suggest to avoid playing their game. What I mean, be positive, avoid negativity, and focus on the situation and not on the behaviors. Ensure that you will apply the active listening tactic and take the information you need in order to bring the results in any way you will understand that works for your stakeholder. It could be face-to-face discussion, it could be email, it could be call. Always, however, ensure that you will have something factor everything in writing if possible in order to review it and ensure that you both have the same information to share. If you have dealt with the same stakeholders before, use any previous success stories to tackle doubts. If not, use again these success stories for the same purpose. It is very important also to ensure that you are factual, always factual, and with a very, very clear vision. And definitely inspire confidence. Make them understand that not only do you manage, but that you control the situation. And if possible, when everything has been completed, invest some time and keep this communication channel open in order to discuss about some reflections and take a feedback in order to see how you could serve them next time better, or if there is no next time, at least to use their feedback for another stakeholder.
Thank you. Some good advice there, taking feedback on board for next time as well. You've talked about obviously communication and interpersonal skills being key to this process, really. So could you give me share an example of your most successful communication strategy, perhaps, and what the outcome was?
I will tell you what is the strategy that I have seen that always works. So at least for the moment, this is something that I don't change. The strategy, or better, my philosophy, is to be open and honest with my stakeholders and genuinely understand their reality. I'm starting from accepting that I don't know everything and that everyone has something to teach me with their experience, specialism, their behavior, and I'm giving them their space to contribute. So this provides an invaluable amount of information about their needs and how they operate. And this information can be used to ensure that they will be served in a way that will feel more comfortable with me and have them on board as we work together. Of course, I'm not naive, and of course there are hiccups, but my most memorable professional successes were associated with this genuinely open communication element.
Thank you, Eirini. I think that openness and building trust key, isn't it, with stakeholders, and kind of setting the ground for kind of future projects as well, and working together and building that credibility, like you say. So what would be your top 5 tips then for our CIPS members to influence stakeholders?
5 tips. First of all, knowledge. Know about yourself, your area, the topic that is to be discussed or worked, and your stakeholders. Properly understand the needs, active listening, continuous and effective communication, manage expectations, definitely need to ensure that you both understand what is expected and to keep updating your stakeholders, be clear and always factual, and definitely build trust and inspire confidence.
Inspiring is very important, like you say. So we're going to be entering a new way of working following the pandemic, and that will impact how we interact as teams, with stakeholder groups, with suppliers. So how do you think more remote working is going to impact us on our ability to influence stakeholders and be engaged in these projects and be able to lead?
So remote working may have a twofold impact. It could either create a wider distance between two parties or may soften and relax approaches. I believe that it depends on if there is an existing relationship or not, and our existing investment on this relationship. On the other hand, if there is a new relationship, again, the previously mentioned tips should equally apply. Active listening can be exercised through every communication channel if there is the will, isn't it? And at the same time, if we want to communicate with our stakeholders, we will do it in a tactful and meaningful way during this situation in order to keep this interaction and this communication and really meaningful levels.
Definitely. And I think not to rely on technology as well, and don't hide behind email, pick up the phone and still have that kind of relationship with people. I think it's quite hard when you're working remotely to be able to just go and pop round and see somebody or have that face-to-face meeting. So yeah, video conference is really important as well. Yeah, so I'd say as well to use the technology and use this as an opportunity to try and gain some more influence and shape the agenda as well.
So in some cases, this period, from my experience, we see each other more frequently now through video conferences than before, because it is something that keeps us closer, and we may make some jokes about the continuous Zoom meetings, but I think that everybody wants to see each other at some until one point.
It's definitely broken down barriers, hasn't it? Letting people into your home and into your personal life, and there's a commonality, isn't there? And people kind of sharing the same issues as well. So, just to close, then, how do you think our influencing skills as procurement and supply professionals need to be enhanced as we move into the new norm and the next few years, really?
Well, if before I said that this situation should not change how we approach the stakeholder management, meaning that if we have invested in a relationship, no matter what, we will find a way to communicate. The skills element is a different story. So in my perspective, this falls to the personal development, self-discipline and self-awareness categories. What I mean is that during this challenging period, there is the opportunity to develop new skills or to work on any identified weaknesses. The important here, however, is how we reflect this. If we want to do something to cover any gaps and to develop ourselves, and how focused and driven we are.
Thank you, Eirini, and thank you so much for some of the tips you shared today. I think hopefully it's given those listening food for thought in terms of how they can plan their stakeholder management moving forward and their strategy, and continue to lead their organisations through all the change that's to come, really. So just to say thank you for listening to the podcast today. Hope you enjoyed it and you can take away some tips to proactively take action with your stakeholder planning. You can follow the CIPS Knowledge podcast channel and access the latest content at cips.org/knowledge. Thank you for joining us. Goodbye.